Ukraine says it's taken another kilometre or two of Russian territory today while pounding Russian airfields with drones overnight. Russia says it is keeping Ukrainian forces from advancing too deep and has destroyed more than 100 drones and missiles. Well, my next guest writes in an essay in Foreign Policy coming out later today about the political implications of the offensive. Carl Bildt says, and I quote him here, the offensive has demonstrated that the war isn't a long and painful road to an inevitable Ukrainian defeat. The Kremlin line that has been echoed by many in the West, including US vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, but very much an open affair. In this situation, it is important to look at every way in which Ukraine's backers can increase their support with the clear and now more realistic aim of shortening the war. Carl Bildt is a diplomat, Swedish diplomat, joining me now from Croatia. And Carl, we were talking about a piece that you've penned for Foreign Policy in which you pointed out the stark difference in the territory Ukraine has managed to take in Russia in a matter of days compared to what Russia has taken on the front lines in Ukraine in the last 3 months. This image encouraging for those who want to see Ukraine succeed, of course. How confident are you that Kyiv can sustain their efforts in Russia? And let's discuss what they mean by those efforts, while also holding on to their positions in their own territory, sir.
Well, that, of course, remains to be seen. I think the significance of what has been happening during the last week with the Kursk offensive is primarily political. What it will mean militarily remains to be seen, but the fact that they are still holding on and indeed expanding after a week is indeed remarkable. But it has changed the entire political picture. I mean, Putin has, since the rather unsuccessful Ukrainian attempt at a counteroffensive last summer, he's tried to build up the narrative that sort of village by village he will grind down Ukraine. There was really no way they could succeed. It was only a matter of time until he could win. That's what he's been trying to build up inside Russia and international. And then suddenly, out of the blue, comes this and destroys that particular narrative.
What do you understand to be the consequences of this change in narrative? I'm trying to get to why it is that Ukraine has pushed this incursion now and what it means for the war and the potential for some sort of brokered peace going forward.
Well, I think it changes the political atmosphere. It changes the morale, the spirit. In Kiev, it's up, obviously, where it's been sort of somewhat subdued for a couple of months. And in Moscow, it's disarray and sort of pessimism and where are these heading. So I think it's a completely different picture of the war, where it's heading. While before the Kursk offensive, there was a lot of people saw a gradual path to Ukrainian defeat. Now, it's a different race, it's a different situation.
Carl, one has to assume, we can't stand this up for sure, but I think it's a good assumption, the Western-supplied weaponry is being used at this point. Should Western weapons be used to attack inside Russia? There was a very big discussion about that when Ukraine had been pushing in its, the first 18 months for extra supplies, about whether or not they should ever be used in and on Russia, or on Russia in Russia. And how concerned are you that the use of Western-supplied weapons could actually trigger a wider escalation between Russia and the West?
I'm not overly concerned about that, I have to confess. It had been one thing if the Ukrainians have said we are there to conquer conquer Russian territory forever. But they've made clear that they have no intention to conquer Russian territory permanently. This is part of the defense of Ukraine. It's an offensive operation that changes the political logic of the war. And as such, I think we should see it as part of the overall defense of Ukraine that we are and should be supporting even more in this particular situation where we see they're actually achieving results.
I've just got some new information into CNN from Dmytro Kholod, who is the Ukrainian military commander, or a Ukrainian military commander. I just want you and our viewers to have a listen to this.
The Russians are now trying to stop our advance. They have pulled in reserves, which has benefited our defense forces in other areas because it's become easier to work there. We have information that reserves were pulled from the Zaporizhia, Crimea and Kharkiv regions to stop our advance. Of course, it will be harder for us to advance further, but we will still advance.
Carl, one would expect that Russia would respond to this sort of move by Ukraine. But what do you make of what he has just said?
I think it shows the strength of the Ukrainian offensive, that the Russians are now forced to draw forces from other parts of its war. That might have been sort of a byproduct that the Ukrainians were aiming at, but it clearly shows that the Russians are in a difficult position. Their forces in the Kursk region are evidently unable to contain the Ukrainian incursion, and they have to draw forces from other parts of the front. Let's see what happens. But this was a development that I think was broadly expected. I expected it a couple of days ago, to be quite frank.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's Carl, it's good to have you. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Always
Carl
a
Bildt
pleasure.
in the house for you.